Quickly, hi, I'm Siobhan Sarna. I'm the founder of Chronic Condition Rescue and SIBO SOS. Kiran Krishnan is our very special guest. He's a microbiologist. He has been leading the way in so many different parts of the world, helping people, educators, doctors, researchers learn about the microbiome. He's the co-founder of Microbiome Labs and has recently, still loving the old school roots of the family, but has gone on to do some other things, all very amicable and very supportive. Today, we're talking about the leaky skin connection to the gut and the body. He has a product that has some very special spores in it that is a topical oil for skin conditions. Now, I was lucky enough to get a sample of it. I have this really obnoxious piece of psoriasis on the front of my shin, and nothing changes it. Okay, I've used clobetasol, I've used everything, and don't you know, it got better. I'm very excited about that. Psoriasis is certainly an inside-out job, and I'm working on it all inside, outside, you name it. So when I asked him to do this webinar with us about this new development, obviously I'm super excited for everyone else to know about it. If you have acne, if you have other skin issues, this is your body telling you things, and you know they call it the heartbreak of psoriasis, but it's also just the heartbreak of any skin condition that you feel like, what is going on? Things are out of control, and what to do about it. And I know chronic skin conditions, you'll try anything, right? Like you'll go sit in the sun, in a tanning booth if you have to. You'll do anything because it's so upsetting. It's so public. It's an intimate and public experience at the same time. You know that. I don't need to keep talking. Kiran Krishnan, take it away. Welcome back to the platform. Tell us everything.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. And you know, one of the last products I developed, especially technologies that we were able to patent everything at Microbiome Labs, was Serene Skin, which was really going after the health of the skin from the inside as the gut-skin connection. So I became very, concerned about skin itself. Understanding that, of course, there's a microbiome on the skin that is likely taking a barrage of the toxicity that we experience in living in the world that we live in, right? Of course, we consume a lot of things that are toxigenic, but our environment is also extremely toxigenic. And we use a lot of things on our skin, from personal care products to makeup, fragrances, all of these things that we know are likely damaging the skin microbiome. So I became a little bit passionate about the skin and skin conditions, because the other thing about skin conditions to me is that not only does it have a health implication, but it also has a cosmetic component to it, right? Social component, right? People don't feel good about themselves. They feel shy. Like, it's different than to have leaky gut and having some digestive issues. You're going to feel a certain way and it's not great, but it's different than having something that's outward facing on your skin. And so we tackled acne first through Serene Skin. And then I started digging into the skin microbiome as a new passion area. And as it turns out, there's this whole new concept called leaky skin, right? And why this becomes even more relevant beyond the skin issues is that, as it turns out, and you'll see this, and I'll do some slides, leaky skin becomes an independent driver of chronic illness. Right? So having barrier dysfunction on your skin can drive conditions that you wouldn't think have anything to do with your skin, like osteoporosis, for example, right? So I'll tackle that for you in a second. So this is why this became extremely important to me in another passionate area. As you know, we worked on leaky gut for years and found solutions for leaky gut, and we're able to publish studies and prove that we can improve that issue. Now we're looking at leaky skin. So improving the cosmetic and the appearance of your skin, improving the barrier and the resilience of your skin, but then also it becomes a factor in your overall health. So let me share some slides so I can dig into this a little bit more and people can understand it a little bit better.
Ooh, okay. I love a good PowerPoint. I like good pictures. Thank you.
Yes, and I try to make some for you and your audience, because I know visually it's easier to understand some of these things that can be a little bit esoteric. So we're talking about leaky skin, and we're talking about it in part because it's a significant driver of not only skin aging, skin conditions that most people are aware of and some people are dealing with, but also chronic illness. And that's where the rubber really hits the road for me, right? So give you a little bit of understanding of the ecosystem of your skin, which is absolutely fascinating. Number one, we have about 20 square feet of skin on our body. So it's a relatively large surface area. But on that 20 square feet, we have about 1.5 trillion resident microbes. We can have upwards of 1,000 different species. So the skin has a very complex ecosystem. And that ecosystem is very important for the functionality of the skin, as you'll see. The most common type of microbes, the most common genre on the skin are microbes called Propionine bacterium, Corneum bacterium, Staphylococcus. I'll delve into these a little bit more as it becomes relevant with conditions, but just keep in mind there's lots of different lots of different genres of microbes on the skin. There are some that predominate certain areas for specific reasons. And we have these transient microbes on the skin as well. So you've got resident microbes that live on the skin permanently or live there long term. And then you've got transient microbes, which you're encountering in the environment all the time. This is where the spores come into the picture as well, because just like in the gut, the spores get swallowed inadvertently and they become transient microbes in the gut, and they have ways of modulating the gut microbiome. As it turns out, the spores have the same effect on the skin. Certain strains of the spores, I should be specific. So imagine that in the natural environment, we're encountering spores in the outside environment. They're sitting on our skin, settling down on different parts of our body. And when they're there, they have the capability of effectuating changes to different parts of your skin microbiome. And I'll show you what some of those changes look like. So both transient and the permanent residents on the skin are really important for the overall health of your skin. Let's look at the ecology of the face. Now, what's interesting about the skin is different parts of your body have very different ecosystems, right? So just the same as like your small bowel and your large bowel have very different ecosystems, even different parts of the small bowel have different ecosystems. The stomach has a different ecosystem. The same thing is true for your skin as well. So if you look at the face is considered a sebaceous area of the body, which means there's a lot of oil being produced, right? You have these sebaceous glands in the layers of your skin that produce oils all the time. Now, because of the oil production, you get a lot of anaerobic areas in the face in itself, because there's a lot of creases and pores and things like that. Those pores fill up with oil, which means that oxygen doesn't penetrate through the oil well. So you end up with all these anaerobic areas of the skin. And because of that, you have particular bacteria that do well in an oily environment and also can live in an anaerobic environment. So you tend to have a lot of Propionine bacterium. That's a large genre of microbes that exists on the face. And so they like the lipids, they like the lipophilic area. Now compare that to more dry areas like the arms and your back and your legs, where the skin is very different. You don't produce oils much. You don't have a lot of anaerobic environment. These areas tend to have a much more mixed microbes like Propionine bacterium, Staphylococcus, Micrococcus, Corneum bacterium, and Streptococcus as well. You have a lot more diversity of microbes on your arms, your lower back, your legs, and these areas that are exposed to the environment a lot more, but also tend to be dry, low in oil, and so on, right? So what's important to note here is that different parts of the body will have different types of ecosystems when it comes to the microbiome of the skin. Now, what are the things that disrupt the microbiome of the skin? Well, age. We'll talk about that in a little bit as we talk more about the leaky skin phenomenon. Gender has an impact on that, and that's in particular because of hormones. So we know women experience things like hormonal acne, right? The reason why hormonal acne is a thing is because as your hormones shift, it changes the microbes on your skin and the conditions on the skin that can make you more susceptible to things like acne. Genetics, of course, there's components of risk within genes itself, environmental factors, so the amount of pollutants, the ecosystem that you live in, climate, do you live in the desert area, do you live in high humidity areas? Those can change and impact the microbiome of the skin. Cosmetics, a lot more information will start coming out about cosmetics and a lot of the ingredients within cosmetics that have a very significant impact on the skin. For example, parabens that are found in cosmetics as preservatives, of course, coloring agents and so on that have a negative impact on the ecosystem of the skin. Diet, hormones, as I mentioned, and especially in the gender component of it, immune function, how your immune system functions, what is the relationship between the microbes on your skin and the immune system that responds to things on your skin. That has a significant effect on how your skin behaves and what type of microbes live on the skin. And I'll unpack that a little bit more as well. Lifestyle, what you eat, your stress levels, exercise, your exposures, all of those things. And then gut health, of course, because of this gut-skin connection, right? So that we've tackled before. So ecological disruptions in the skin tend to become the primary insult that makes skin susceptible to lots of the issues that we see on the skin. So everything from things like atopic dermatitis, psoriasis, eczema, dryness of the skin, acne, non-cystic acne especially. And when you look at just rosacea and redness of the skin, the thinning of the skin, and then in particular, aging of the skin as well, fine lines, wrinkles, moisture control, all of those things are all driven by an initial disruption to the ecosystem of the skin. And there's more and more of this data coming out, and we'll unpack a little bit about that as we go along here. So a core tenet of this idea of leaky skin is that the microbial community that lives on a particular part of your skin has an impact and influence on the host cell. And then the host cell, which is your skin cells, and you have many different types of skin cells in your different layers of skin, right? So you've got the epidermis and the dermis, and within the epidermis and the dermis itself, you've got multiple layers of cells. So the host cell, which makes up the epidermis and the dermis, how those cells respond to the immune system or recruit the immune system, right? So depending on what the microbial community is producing, what kind of metabolic byproducts they have, what kind of supportive or toxigenic products they may produce, it affects the host cell. And then the host cell communicates with the immune system to recruit different types of immune cells to the area to effectuate change in that given area, right? So whether you have redness or tenderness in that part of the skin, if you have damage to that part of the skin, if you have dryness in that part of the skin, if you have overt immunological responses in that part of the skin, a lot of that is dictated by this communication between the host, the microbial community, the host cell, and then eventually the immune system that responds. Now, the immune system that responds also comes and has an effect on the host cell. Like any other part of the body, when you have the innate immune system, the inflammatory part of the immune system responding, more often than not, it damages tissue as much as it controls any kind of egregious toxin or microbe in the area, right? Because it's non-specific. It comes in with inflammation and bombards that area. So the damage to the host cell can then also have more influence on what the microbial community looks like. And then there is some specific crosstalk between the microbial community and the host cell itself, right? So there's a lot happening here in terms of communication between the microbes, the skin cells, and the immune system. And a balance in that communication is really dictated by the types of microbes that exist in that area. I'll give you a couple examples of that, right? So just to summarize what I've said here, the immune system of the host modulates the microbial community because the immune system, once it starts responding to things in that area, can produce things like antimicrobials and other peptides that control the types of microbes that grow on that part of the skin. The microbial community and its composition, they have a great impact on the host's immune system. So then the immune system is responding really to the ecosystem of the microbes. And the immune system can control, to some degree, the ecosystem of the microbes. And both the immune system and the microbial community impact the host cell itself. And we end up losing barrier function when you start to see a lot of systemic inflammation, or when you start to see localized inflammation that then translates to systemic inflammation. Now, what am I talking about when I say we lose barrier function, right? The skin is a very dynamic and interesting barrier, right? Because it's designed like a brick wall, because it has all these layers of cells, just like you would have layers of bricks to form a wall, right? So it has all these layers of cells. It's got the dead cells at the very top, the epidermal cells. And then within the epidermis itself, it's got different types of cells, squamous cells. It's got all these cells that protect the system. And in part of the epidermis, you also have this layer of lipid, right? So this is a ceramide layer. This is a fatty acid layer that creates kind of a barrier system to prevent moisture and things from escaping from the skin. But that lipid layer also prevents toxins, microbes, and all that from going through. Right, so maintaining that ceramide structure, maintaining the exopolysaccharides within the skin cells itself, and maintaining the collagen and elastin fibers that give the lattice under which the skin functions becomes really important to the barrier function of the skin. If you start to lose the ceramide structures, the lipid structures, if you start to lose the collagen and elastin function, and you start to lose that matrix that holds all the skin cells together, you start compromising the actual barrier structure of the skin. And that tends to look like aging of the skin, right? We'll dig into that a little bit more as well. And as it turns out, studies show that the skin microbiome is arguably one of the most accurate predictors of true biological age. Outside of skin conditions, we're talking about systemic biological age, right? Where does this data come from? We're seeing this really interesting scientific revelation, and it comes from this long-term study called the Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging. This is a very unique study because what they did, and this was initiated almost 50 years ago, and the study is still going on, right? Now, most aging-related studies, what they do is they take a cohort of older people, so let's say people in their 70s and 80s, and then they compare them to cohorts of younger people, people in their 30s, late 20s, and so on, and they look at different biological parameters, their cells, their mitochondria, all the different things, and they try to compare and understand the difference between an aged population versus a younger population. Now, there's a big problem there in that this age population went through a lot of different things than this younger population does, right? If you're in your 70s and 80s, the environment that you grew up in predominantly throughout your 30s, 40s, and 50s is significantly different than what these individuals are exposed to right now in their 20s and 30s, right? The level of toxicity, the diets, the things that they're exposed to, the level of stress, all of those things are very different. So you're not necessarily comparing apples to apples, you're comparing apples to oranges. Now, what this study decided back in the late 1950s is they said, we want to do an aging study, and let's take each individual. So they took people in their 20s and 30s at that time, and they said, let's follow each individual over the next 50 years and look at how their body changes and ages, look at their risk for developing chronic disease, look at their behavior, their choices, and try to figure out what are the drivers of age-related degeneration and age-related chronic disease, right? And they were looking at all these variables. And then they were also looking at markers that could predict the onset of chronic disease and age-related degeneration and so on. So this is a very unique study. And as it turns out, as the data started coming out, they found that weathered or unhealthy skin is emerging as a major risk factor for almost every single age-related disease, including things like Parkinson's and type 2 diabetes. You wouldn't think that wrinkles on your skin and dryness on your skin and hyperpigmentation on your skin or lack of uniform pigment, right? So having dark spots and things like that, you wouldn't think that that has anything to do with risk for things like type 2 diabetes or things like osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative conditions, right? But it does. As it turns out, they were able to look at all this data longitudinally, and they could see that people with aged and dysfunctional skin were the people that had the highest risk for chronic disease. And they could predict mortality and the development of chronic disease by looking and measuring people's skin and the age-related degeneration of the skin over time, right? And so then the question becomes, well, what is happening to the skin that's driving this degeneration? Now, a lot of the thinking, that I first thought of, and a lot of people think of, is that if the skin looks aged, it's because it's a reflection of the inside, right? Your inside is unhealthy, thereby you've got this chronic disease risk and so on, and that's reflected on the skin. Well, as it turns out, that's not actually the case. The skin itself is getting damaged first, and the skin becoming leaky skin is presenting a completely new risk factor for the development of other chronic illnesses, right? So losing the barrier function of the skin, which is the skin's primary role, right, is to act as a barrier in the body. It's one of the true components of the body that is primarily a barrier. The gut barrier is a very dynamic system. It's supposed to allow lots of things through, right? That's why it's formed with tight junctions, and it's only one cell thick. It can open and close in between the cells and all that, because you need all the nutrients and all to go through, but then it's supposed to stay cinched for things that shouldn't go through. The skin is always a barrier 100% of the time, not allowing things to get through. You don't want things, any molecules, to really penetrate through the skin on a given on a regular basis. So the skin is a true barrier. So if you lose that barrier function, as it turns out, that becomes a risk factor for chronic disease. So this is where this became really, really interesting to me, because aged skin drives chronic disease risk. We all are concerned about aged skin, but more so from a cosmetic perspective, because we don't want to look older. We don't want fine lines and wrinkles. We don't want, dysregulation in our pigmentation. We don't want dryness of the skin and the thinning of the skin. We don't want redness and inflammation. All those things bother us from a cosmetic and outward appearance factor. But on top of that, we now understand that that's also presenting as a risk factor for chronic issues, right? So this becomes so much more important than what we originally thought when we think about the health and the look and the appearance of skin itself. So let's give you some examples of common conditions on the skin that are actually driven by skin microbiome dysbiosis, right? So take eczema and atopic dermatitis. It's now pretty well established that it's driven by an increase in pathogenic bacteria, especially Staphylococcus aureus, on certain parts of the skin where you start developing eczema and atopic dermatitis. Well, why is that? Well, Staphylococcus aureus, as it sits on your skin cells, will produce toxins and create damage to the host cell. That host cell will, because of that damage, recruits immune cells to that area. You get a barrage of inflammatory immune cells to that area. The inflammatory immune cells are trying to control the microbes in that given area, so they're bombarding it with inflammation. That inflammation damages the skin cells, damages the collagen fibers, damages the ceramide layers, leaving that part of the skin thin, dry, and dysfunctional, looking like an eczema and atopic dermatitis plaque. Right? And it's because of the presence of the microbes. Now, if you have areas of your body where you have a little eczema patch and another area where you don't, the difference between those two areas is this area has too much Staph aureus versus this area probably doesn't have too much Staph aureus. Hence, you don't have an eczema patch there or plaque, right? So same thing with psoriasis. Psoriasis is largely driven by a disrupted balance with low diversity in these dry areas of the skin, and an increase in a group of bacteria called Corneum bacterium, and an increase in staph and strep as well, right? So, what Siobhan was saying, that one part of her leg, the reason why that part is constantly a problem, even if you use anti-inflammatories, right? Because remember, the anti-inflammatory is trying to slow down the immune system's response in response to the presence of those pathogens and those dysfunctional bacteria. The bacteria are still there, even if you're using the anti-inflammatories and the steroid creams. And so it's not really going after the root cause, which is the lack of diversity and the high presence of these particular pathogens in that given area. So that area is constantly dysfunctional until you can control the microbes in that area and shift the microbiome in that space. Acne is also driven with an increase in a type of commensal bacteria on the face called Cutibacterium acnesis. When you have high levels of Cutibacterium acnesis, what happens is you end up clogging up your pores with too much oil production, because there's a lot of inflammation happening in the presence of too much Cutibacterium acnesis. And then the sebaceous glands try to protect the skin by producing more oils. Those oils clog up the pores. In the pores, you've got clogged oil and you've got an overgrowth of bacteria. That bacteria elicits an inflammatory immune response from your immune system. that then forms an inflammatory plaque under the skin, right? This is how you end up with an acne lesion that is really a comedone, which is under the skin, versus something like eczema or psoriasis, which is on the top layer of the skin. You're forming that in the bottom layers of the epidermis, where you're actually forming this mound because you've got an infected pore with too much Cutibacterium acnesis. So if you have acne, it's because of an overgrowth of Cutibacterium acnesis. And in response, your body and your skin are trying to fight it off with inflammation, overproduction of sebum, and so on. And it actually leads to the formation of a plaque, of an acne lesion or a plaque. Aging. Aging is one of the really great examples of dysbiosis driven by a dysfunctional skin microbiome, right? So what is very clear when you look at aged skin. So when you look at younger skin that's smooth and clear, especially if we're talking on the face, what you tend to have is a lot of Propionum bacterium. Remember, that's the microbe that's well established to be able to live on an oily anaerobic surface. Now, as you age and you disrupt the skin microbiome quite a bit, and as a result, you change the ecosystem, what you tend to see is people tend to see an increase in corneum bacterium on the skin, right? So an increase in corneum bacterium and a lowering of Propionum bacterium is indicative of a skin that's moving towards significant aging. You also see a decrease in Acinetobacter, and you see an increase in Proteobacter, right? So higher Proteobacter, higher corneum bacter is a significant marker of aging process of the skin. Now, as that happens, you start getting lower sebum production. You start getting lower hydration because you start to dismantle the ceramide structures on the skin. So you lose more moisture out of your skin, and you start to see an increase in immunological function because you've got more dysbiotic microbes on the skin. So you're getting more recruitment of immune cells to the area. That recruitment of immune cells over time and the inflammation starts to break down the collagen and elastin fibers. You lose the elasticity of the skin and the tension, and you start to form fine lines and wrinkles much easier, right? So the process tends to go thinning of the skin because you're not turning over the skin cells. I'll give you a little more detail on that in the next slide. You start to lose moisture on the skin, so skin starts to dry out. You start to lose the function of collagen and elastin, and then you lose the tension of the skin. You start developing fine lines and wrinkles. Now, we know cosmetically, none of us want that, but also note that all that means is that the barrier system is also becoming dysfunctional, and your skin is becoming an independent factor for the chronic condition you're dealing with, right? So that's the really, really important part. So these changes create these cutaneous microbiota alterations, changes in the ecosystem of the skin. It drives microbial imbalance, further aging and loss of barrier, and then, of course, reduce ability to protect against things like UV radiation, blue light irradiation, chemical and environmental toxogens, and so on, right? So one of the big problems of losing some of these structural elements of the skin is you lose resilience to your skin, right? Your skin becomes far more susceptible to things like photoaging or phototoxicity. So exposure to UV radiation from the sun is a lot more toxigenic to an aged skin than a healthy skin, right? So all of the things in our environment that are not great for our skin has more and more and more impact as time goes on, as our microbiome changes. So part of our message is about rebuilding the microbial ecosystem of the skin. That in itself will change some of the features of the skin, which you'll see. But you're also rebuilding the resilience of your skin, which not only makes you more resilient to aging, but it also makes you more resilient to all the negative stimuli that surround you. Things like UV radiation, blue light irradiation from screens, and so on, right? So let's look at the difference between what happens with a balanced skin microbiome versus a dysfunctional skin microbiome, right? So this gives you a clue how good beneficial bacteria on the skin actually affect features of the skin. So first, let's look at balanced microbiome. A balanced microbiome of the skin prevents the overgrowth of pathogens, so it reduces toxin production and reduces the recruitment of immune cells to the skin, right? So this means that skin is resilient. right? It's not inflamed. It has low levels of inflammation and a high tolerance of negative stimuli. So you can stand more UV radiation. You can stand more chemical exposure. You can stand more stressors and so on, right? That balanced nature of the skin is really important. The moment you start increasing in the presence of certain pathogens like Staph aureus or Streptococcus, you start to become more susceptible, and things like contact and rubbing can create dermatitis, right? That's why there's something called contact dermatitis. For people with susceptible skin, if you're wearing a backpack for example, for a few hours, you might get a rash in this part as something called contact dermatitis, because that part of the skin is not resilient because you've got too much Staphylococcus aureus in that area, right? So balanced skin, low levels of pathogens means you have a high degree of resilience. You also have balanced skin. Your balanced skin microbiome tends to produce adequate amount of protease enzymes. And remember, protease enzymes are the proteolytic enzymes that break down proteins. Now, what these enzymes do that the skin microbes produce are that they break down the stratum corneum. That's the very top layer of the skin. And that allows for the skin to turn over, because what you want is the very top layers of the dead skin to break off and slough off, and then the skin grows from within, right? So you want that top layer turning over very frequently. Now, what happens if you don't do that? Well, the repairs of the skin can slow down. So when you have healthy skin and the top layer is turning over fast, that means if you get a cut, you get a scratch, you get a bruise, whatever it may be, the skin turns over and repairs faster. You have a higher glow to the skin because you don't have a high level of dead cells sitting there, which tend to be dull because, of course, they don't retain moisture and so on. You have a much more fresh look, and you have a thicker appearance to the skin. You tend to have a thin, dry-looking appearance of the skin with no glow, a dull appearance of the skin if you're not producing enough of this protease enzyme, right? And you don't produce a protease enzyme if you don't have a good balanced microbiome on your skin. Also, a good balanced microbiome produces lipase enzyme. Lipase enzyme is a type of enzyme that breaks down fat, right? So this lipase enzyme effectively breaks down and regenerates the lipid layer on the skin, thereby helping to maintain moisture and that strong ceramide barrier on the skin. Now, these ceramides are coming through your diet, right? So there's phytoceramides, which typically come through plant-based foods. So you've got plant-based foods that have ceramides in them, which are a particular type of fatty acid. When you absorb them, the fatty acids go to the liver converts them to a ceramide that our skin can use, and then those ceramides are specifically transported to the skin area. In order for the new ceramides to come in and regenerate and create that new barrier, we're constantly turning over this new fatty acid layer barrier. We need to break down the old fatty acids that are on there so we can replace it with a new kind. If you don't do that, you get the old fatty acids that are constantly grabbing toxins and all that and becoming toxigenic, becoming dull, losing their structural integrity, and thereby starting to break down by allowing moisture and all that through. You lose the moisture barrier in the skin. So you need the ceramide layer to keep turning over. The lipase enzyme production by the good commensal microbes on the skin becomes a very important part of that, right? So you become resistant to water loss. You've got proper function of collagen and elastin fibers, because as you lose moisture on the skin, the collagen and elastin fibers dry out and they lose their functionality, right? Those proteins can dry out if your skin becomes too dry, and you lose the elasticity and you become more susceptible to fine lines, wrinkles, and damage to the skin itself. You also have microbes on the skin that produce urease, which is an enzyme, free fatty acids, and it regulates sebum to manage the pH of the skin. So these urease enzyme will take some of the byproducts of your skin and convert them to free fatty acids to maintain a low pH in the skin. The low pH in the skin is very important because the low pH maintains some of the ecosystem in the skin, right? It's also the balance of your pH that prevents fungal and yeast overgrowth, right? Your skin naturally is at a pH of around 4.5 to 5, right? That's a good natural pH. It's a little bit more acidic than, of course, water being at a pH of 7. pH is a logarithmic scale. So pH of 4.5 to 7 is actually 100-fold, 1,000-fold difference in the level of acidity. So your skin is relatively acidic, which is good because that prevents the growth of candida and other fungal and yeast problems as well. So if you have a lot of yeasty issues on your scalp and your skin and so on, you're losing hair, you're getting alopecia areata and other problems on the skin, it may be because the pH of your skin is too high, and the pH of your skin is too high because you have an imbalanced microbiome not producing enough urease enzyme, right? The urease enzyme is very important to produce the free fatty acids that acidify your skin. So now when you increase the pH in the skin, what tends to happen is not only do you get fungal and yeast overgrowth, it also creates an issue with the collagen and elastin fibers because a more neutral or basic pH dismantles the collagen and elastin proteins. And so you start to lose the tension and the capability of the skin to bounce back from frowning and wrinkling and smiling and all of those things, right? So you start getting sagging of the skin, and you start losing that youthful composition of the skin as well. And then, of course, this effective quorum sensing. So quorum sensing, as you've heard me talking about the gut side of it, this happens in the gut as well, is the ability of microbes to read each other's signatures and try to control some of the microbes in that skin environment. This is where some of the transient microbes become really important. As you're walking through the environment and transient spores get onto your skin, one of the first things they do is they do the quorum sensing. They sense the presence of dysfunctional microbes, and they can produce compounds on your skin that actually bring down the level of dysfunctional microbes, and they can recruit your immune cells to come and produce antimicrobial peptides to reduce the growth of dysfunctional microbes. While they do that, then the more healthy microbes start to grow. You form biofilms on the skin, which are microscopic. You can't see them. I've had people asking me about biofilms in the skin. They are microscopic. You cannot see them. On healthy skin, you will always have some degree of biofilm production because that's how some of these good commensal organisms protect themselves from the outside environment and all that. So you want healthy balance. You want healthy biofilm production. And your beneficial microbes also drive antioxidant production on your skin and quench free radicals for you on your skin as well. As you know, we're always experiencing oxidative stress and free radical damage on the skin, especially when we gain exposure to UV radiation. One of the effects of UV radiation on the skin is a creation of free radicals, and the free radicals continue to damage the skin cells even after you get out of the sun, right? So having this effective quorum sensing, this ability to control the microbial community provides that protection. The skin is resilient, it's resilient to oxidative stress, and it prevents damage, which then prevents something called senescence. Now, if you're following lots of anti-aging information and all that, you've probably heard of senescent cells. Senescent cells throughout the body, especially on the skin, are cells that are also referred to as zombie cells, right? So they're basically cells that have become immortal in some way. They could keep conducting the same function to a uncontrolled degree, but they're not turning over. They're not under the control of your system like they're supposed to be. On the skin, the cells that are most susceptible to senescence are the pigment cells, so the melanocytes. So these are the cells that produce melanin, right? So these cells, when they undergo a lot of oxidative stress and they don't have the support of a healthy, balanced microbiome to reduce the oxidative stress, they end up becoming senescent. When they become senescent, what they do is they sit there and they just keep producing pigment even without stimulus. This is how you end up getting dark spots and hyperpigmentation. That's why this is a feature of aging skin. Dark spots, or as they call them, age spots, are related to aged skin because these cells are becoming senescent. They're becoming zombie cells. They're not turning over. They're simply sitting there overproducing pigment, which is not a good thing because many of these cells, we don't want them to become immortal zombie cells, right? And the problem with melanocytes is that because they become zombie cells, they can also trigger the cells in that area, the other skin cells, to also become zombie cells as well. Your skin becomes significantly aged when you have a lot of senescent cells on the skin. right? And the changes in the microbial ecosystem can drive some of that senescence as well. So now when you look at dysbiotic skin, if you have pathogen overgrowth, you tend to have high toxin production and recruitment of immune cells that makes your skin red. It makes it sensitive, makes it irritated, makes it susceptible to conditions like eczema, psoriasis, and so on, right? And then if you have low protease production, so you have low turnover of the top layer of the skin, the stratum corneum, you get an accumulation of damaged skin that tends to look like dull, thin skin. You have loss of ceramide and lipid barrier, so if you don't have enough microbes producing the lipase enzyme, you lose the ceramide structure, you lose the lipid barrier, skin loses moisture and becomes leaky. Microbes and toxins can migrate through deeper into the skin and elicit more inflammatory responses in the skin, so the skin tends to look dry, red, and irritated, right? And it also becomes very sensitive to things like irritations, like either chemical irritations or touch or contact and so on. Yeast or fungal overgrowth can occur in skin that doesn't produce enough of the free fatty acids from the changes in the microbiome, and thereby you start to get this increase in pH, and that ends up showing presenting like thin skin with a lot of wrinkles and fine lines, and of course yeast and fungal overgrowth, which can have its own significant issues and symptomology. And then of course skin that is dysbiotic becomes much more susceptible to oxidative damage and the accumulation of free radicals. And so UV stimuli and other negative stimuli can damage these cells, especially the melanocytes. And what you tend to get is discoloration and hyperpigmentation on the skin, right? So all of these features that we know of that are things that are not favorable on the skin also have a microbial component to them, right? So then the question is, what can you do about it? So we started looking at the quorum sensing ability of the spores. We know they do a lot of quorum sensing and change the microbiome in the gut. In nature, you're also getting a lot of spores on your skin. So we wanted to see, is there an impact of spores on the skin itself? So we created this spore-based biobalancing serum, which is good for all skin types, right? And it starts to become an essential part of maintaining a healthy barrier of your skin itself. So I'll give you a couple examples of some subjects and some tests that we've done. We have a 400 subject study going on right now. We'll have, as you know, the way I do things, we'll have a lot more studies coming out. But I want to give you some examples here of what we saw, not only in changes in the microbiome, but then before and afters in the appearance of these people's skin itself. So take this participant number one, right? I'm looking at their baseline skin microbiome analysis. And you see here they have Propionum bacterium, which is fine. That's a normal part of the face. But what they also tend to have is a lot of corneum bacterium. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of corneum bacterium is also one of those microbes that start to increase as you start aging in your skin itself, right? So this individual has probably too much prevalence of corneum bacterium in their skin. And if you look down here at this other, the dark matter part of it, they've got some bifidobacterium, which is good, staph epidermidis, which is good, but they also have a lot of Cutibacterium magnesis, right? So they have almost 60% Cutibacterium magnesis. So if I never looked at this individual and I just looked at this microbial sampling of their skin layer and the dark matter in their skin, and when we say the dark matter, we're talking about like as we pull out the sebum and the pores when you use like Biore strips and all to get deeper into the skin, right? So if I looked at this individual, I would say that this individual probably has significant redness, probably has acne, and probably gets thinness and dryness to the skin as well, right? So they probably have marks and they scar easy because of the corneum bacterium, and because of the high level of Cutibacterium magnesis, they probably have acne. Now, after 14 days of using the sieve once a day on their skin, we start to see a significant change. Now the corneum bacterium here that was at 2.7% is now at 1.6, so a significant drop in the relative abundance. And as you see here, Cutibacterium magnesis was almost 60%, is now 13% in the skin, right? And you're starting to see dermacoccus, which is good for the skin. You're starting to see dermacoccus up here that wasn't even present before in this part of the sampling. And sure enough, when you look at the before and afters, you see the significant changes in this individual. So they have lots of redness, hyperpigmentation, irritation to the area. And then just after a couple weeks of using it, in this case, I think this before and after 60 days of using it, you see a complete clearing of not only the redness and the lesions, the acne-based lesions, but also some of these hyperpigmentation, dents and lines and all of these discoloration that the individual tend to have as well. So we're seeing not only the physical changes on the skin, but we're seeing it reflected in the microbiota of the skin as well. I have a couple more I'll show you in this individual. So this individual also has 14% Cutibacter magnesis. We were able to reduce it down to 11%. So they don't have a lot. So I wouldn't say that this person has significant acne, maybe a few lesions and a few redness, but they do have high levels of Corneum bacterium. So they have probably other manifestations on the skin that doesn't look good. But then after the treatment with the SIV, we see a significant reduction in the Cutibacterium, but also a significant reduction, a significant increase in Staphylococcus epidermidis, which is the good staph you want on the skin, which produces the protease and the urease and all that I talked about. So when we look at this individual, what you tend to see is, again, just a few lesions, which is reflective of the somewhat low levels of Cutibacterium, but then you see the pigmentation issue, the topography issue, the skin tone, texture, and clarity significantly improve. And this is just after 2 weeks on this individual as well, right? So then show you other before and afters as well. Hyperpigmentation, lesions, all of that reduced significantly in as little as 30 days. There's a new glow to the skin, regulating oil levels significantly. Looking at this individual, significant reduction in the number of acne lesions. Again, this is just in 2 weeks, right? And in these cases, they did nothing else but use the SIV. Their normal routine of cleaning and all that, but they just use the SIV serum on their skin once a day.
Karen, hang on for just a second. I'm getting barraged with messages. Time out for just a second. It's $59 because I know you guys are wondering, and and Kieran and I have such a beautiful friendship. He is giving our community 15% off. I mean, I'm totally convinced because I used it on my spot, my big psoriasis spot, and it got smaller. So it's not just for the face, that was on my leg. Use code SIBO SOS. It's 15% off, guys and gals. Do you ship internationally, Kieran? Oh, and they only have 100 bottles in stock. So they're going to be restocking in a couple of weeks. But if you want that first batch for us at 100 left, please do grab it now. Do you ship internationally?
We do, yeah. We've been shipping to all kinds of countries. I think 26 or 27 different countries. So absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So check out the link. Coupon code SIBO SOS. It's 15% off. It's only $59. I've spent hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on skincare that did nothing for me. I don't know about if anyone else can relate, or it was, maybe it did something to me, but the downside was a lot of toxicity. I want you to keep going, Kieran, but I do want you to know we have a ton of questions. So,
absolutely.
Look at that.
Let me jump in. So you see what the product looks like, right? So it comes in a tube like this. And basic use of it is if you're doing it on your face, you put 1 drop and you want to shake it up a little bit because some of the spores can settle at the bottom. You could see the bottom because it's translucent, and you'll see it as darkening on the bottom if they're settling. So you want to shake it up good. And then you put 1 drop on each side of your cheek, and then you rub it in throughout your face. If you're using it on your body, like if you have a psoriasis spot or eczema spot, you can put it directly on the spot and rub it in. If the skin is broken, we would say wait for it to heal before you use it on broken skin. Broken skin is complicated, so we don't want people to get any complications with it. There should be absolutely no issue, but wait for the skin to heal before you use it if it's completely broken and it's exposed. And then if you want to use it on your body, and I use it generally on my body, what I tend to do is I take my lotion in my hand, I put 2 or 3 drops of it in the lotion, I mix it up, and that's how I use it on my body generally. And then I use a dropper on each side of my face. If you're using it just on your face, this 1 tube will last you about 30 days. If you're using it on your body and face, it'll last you about 15 to 20 days. So that's how you judge the number of tubes you need. Now, quorum sensing is the key underlying technology here. It's the ability of the spores to do quorum sensing, which I mentioned earlier. So they can change your skin microbiome. And again, this goes back to basic natural thinking, right? We are supposed to encounter these microbes on our skin on a regular basis because we lived in the dirt and we lived in natural environments. We just no longer work with these organisms naturally anymore. So getting it back onto your skin becomes a very significant advantage to your skin. There's no contraindications. You use it once a day. It's very easy to use. Basically, you can use it at night before bed is how most people use it. After you wash your face, you put it on before your moisturizer, and it becomes super simple, right? You don't have to worry about contraindications to other things that you may be using as well. This is a basic formula, right? So it's got the bacillus spores, it's got squalene, which is really a nice biomimetic oil, caprylic acid, which is a triglyceride, and glyceryl caprylic, which is another fatty acid as well that is biomimetic, which looks like your fatty acids on your skin. So there's no water, there's no moisture, there's no liquid moisture in there. It's all a simple serum with the bacillus spores. Very clean, no preservatives or any of that stuff in it. Super clean for people. So that's the product in general. Let's tackle some questions at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's throw some love into the chat for Kiran. First of all, that was amazing, and I'm excited. I'm full of all kinds of hope. I can see why you have gone in this direction. You had so many options to follow in terms of your passions after your recent, transition of work. Couple of things. It's different than just taking Megaspore and putting it in an oil and slathering it on your skin. So let's just be clear about that. I saw a couple of questions about that. Can I just use those spores and put them topically? I have used Megaspore topically before, but this was totally, totally different.
Yeah.
Also, I want to tell everybody, I don't know how many are left right now. We did start with 100 because Kiran and I had a little scheduling confusion, and he was like, "It's today." I'm like, "Dude, it's today." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I have to go check the stock." I'm like, "Okay, you do that." He's like, "We only have 100." I'm like, "What?" Anyway, I wanted to show you something else that we're doing. My community has been, SIBO SOS has been working with Kiran for literally years. And I want to show you something we're doing. If you are deciding to do this right now, to pick this up for only $59, I have 2 very special presentations from Kiran from paid for summits that I've done in the past. And here he is, probiotics from a microbiologist standpoint with Kiran Krishnan. And then here's part 2, the continuation of that. It's a really special combination of interviews that I did with Kiran. And if you send us to info@SIBO SOS, and Clarissa will put the information in the chat, we will send you those 2 very special interviews that other people, thousands of people, have paid for. They're really great. He's great, as you can tell. So that was just like a little extra frosting on the cake. I'm not sending that out to people like afterwards. If you send me, we'll know what time this begins and ends. So it's really just for those of you who are here right now and you take action right now. Okay, what about for the scalp, Kiran?
Yeah. So we have a lot of people that use it for the scalp. If you have dry, flaky scalp, if you have a suspected fungal issue and you're getting alopecia areata, we actually have had a lot of people use it on for alopecia areata as well with great success. So absolutely no issue there, and I think you'll see some really interesting outcomes there on the scalp.
Wow. So is it something that you use on an ongoing basis, or just while you need it? Because if you're dealing with balancing the microbiome, when it becomes balanced, do you still need to keep using it?
It's almost, I think of it kind of like how you would think about a probiotic, right? Let's say you're taking a probiotic for a very specific issue, and that issue is now under control. You would probably still use it intermittently. You may not need to use it every day anymore. You might be able to use it once or twice a week, ongoing, just to maintain. And the only reason we would need to maintain it is because of all of the negative stimuli we have in the environment and all the things that we use in our bodies, right? It's going to be so hard for people to go through all their personal care products and try to clean it all up and remove anything with preservatives and antifungals and antimicrobials and all that stuff, right? It's unrealistic to think that that can happen. So those things do have a negative effect on your skin. So we want to keep rebalancing the skin on a regular basis. For me, it's something I would use somewhat regularly, forever, because I'm working on my maintaining skin. As I'm getting older, I'm like, I don't want to look like I'm getting older. And I also don't want this to be another factor to deal with in managing chronic illness risk, right? So I want to make sure the skin is healthy.
The bigger picture than just good looks and,
Mm-hmm.
and vanity for the lowest aspect of describing it. Info at SIBO SOS, I just put it in the chat. If anyone is picking this up during this webinar right here live, you can send us your proof of purchase and we will send you those 2 interviews. Does it help with Grover's disease lesions? I don't know what is that.
We've never tried it with that. So yeah, I can't say. And again, if the skin is broken and open, I would say wait till it heals, right? Because you just don't know how people's skin is going to respond if it's open skin. And we haven't done studies on open skin. We've done a bunch of studies on irritation on skin, and we've confirmed without a doubt this is a non-irritant that doesn't cause any irritation on the skin at all. So it's absolutely safe for any kind of skin, even for people who are very sensitive. But when the skin is broken, you just don't know. So I would say wait till it heals.
By the way, I haven't skipped anyone's questions. I have hundreds of questions that have flown in through this, so I'm not like ignoring anybody. What about basal skin carcinoma?
Yeah, I mean, carcinomas are a whole other category, a whole other ball of wax, right? I couldn't think of a direct mechanism by which this would help with the carcinoma. It's not going to hurt, absolutely, but you know, with the basal cell carcinoma, you have to work with your doctors and work with your dermatologists and oncologists. If there's issues on the appearance of the skin in the area, you can absolutely use it. We don't see any contraindication, but we can't say anything about it helping with the condition.
What about seborrheic keratosis? Those are the little bumps that we get on the back of the arms.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. So I don't have a lot of cases on it, but my son actually has a little bit of that on his skin. He's 13 now, and I think there's probably a hormonal component to that as well. So I've been using it on that part of his arm for him, and we're seeing it improve quite a bit. Right, it's a case of one that I'm familiar with, but I've been using it on that, and it has helped. It's helped with a lot of things that we weren't quite sure it would have an impact, and I think that's because a lot of these skin issues are driven by dysbiosis. You know, it's kind of like that. The idea is that if you fix the gut dysbiosis, so many other things fall into place, right? So, yeah, I hate to say that it helps with this, and this, but and sound like snake oil, but if you fix the skin microbiome, it seems to have improvement on lots of different issues.
Donna is asking, what's the difference between this and serene skin? So serene skin is something you take internally. And Clarissa, if you could put the link for Microbiome Labs with our 15% discount, that's the internal probiotic that Kiran helped to develop over at Microbiome Labs. We'll throw that up there. So one's internal, one's external, right?
Yeah. Now the spores are different as well, because serene skin is really designed around changing short chain fatty acid production in the gut, especially increasing acetate production. So we've got higher levels of HU36, coagulants, and so on in there. And then, of course, the HU36 also provides the antioxidant effect in the gut. And so that's modulating what's happening in the gut metabolically. This one, it doesn't have the HU36 in it. It has higher levels of the HU58. And then the delivery mechanism is really important. The lipid mix that has been developed for it seems to be important in terms of getting the spores to where they need to be. So if you think about the stratum corneum, which is the topmost layer of your skin, right? That's a dead cell area. What we want to do is get these spores beyond that a little bit, slightly deeper into the epidermal area, so that they have better interaction with the live cells and they have better communication with the immune system as well. So the delivery mechanism seems to make a difference, because for years we had been using things like Megaspore, mixing it in shea butter and doing things, and we would see some effect, right? And this is because for many years I've been thinking about spores on the skin, because we're using the spores on things like cell phones and inanimate objects to see if they can prevent growth of dysfunctional microbes on inanimate objects, and they can, right? So we said we were using it on the skin, but we just weren't getting the kind of results we're getting now. So I think the delivery mechanism and the cleanness of this is really important. Keep in mind, in Megaspore and all that, you have, dextrin fibers and other things that are in the product that are designed for the gut that don't necessarily help with getting the spores into the skin.
Okay, Steph said that we got something a little bit wrong. The back of the arms is a different, I said it's a different thing. So Steph, you gave me 2 abbreviations. Type it out for me. Okay. but I'm glad to hear it's helping with your child's back of the arm. This is the seborrheic keratosis for years from my gut inflammation. I've been developing it. Miriam, I think that's the same person. Is this because of leaky gut or inflammation in the gut? Would the probiotic oil help with this? So seborrheic keratosis versus what the other one was. I don't know. Sorry. Let's just keep going. Steph, if you have the answer, you can pop it in. If we have acne, rosacea, dryness that is likely 95% a leaky gut microbiome issue, should we take Serene Skin, SIV, or both?
Yeah. So we have a lot. So with SIV, we are directing it towards estheticians and skincare professionals. And the first adopters of SIV were the ones that have been using Serene Skin. And in fact, we did a small trial at a cosmetic esthetician clinic in Scottsdale early last year, where she was using both Serene Skin to deal with the inside, and then of course SIV on the outside, and she was getting much more profound results on both, right? So if you've got some severe skin issues, I would really recommend thinking about doing both.
Okay. And does this, well, so basically, is it anti-aging?
So yes. So, okay, it's hard to prove that through a study because you need time to see the skin age, right? So you need to do kind of a longitudinal study. So it's hard to say that with validation from scientific study that I can go, here, I'll show you this study, it's anti-aging. From a mechanistic standpoint, it absolutely is, because what we know is it's bringing down the microbes that are associated with aged skin. It's bringing down the Enterococcus, the corneum bacterium, and so on, and it's increasing the microbes that are associated with youthfulness. So propionum bacterium, staph epidermidis, and so on. So just looking at it from that mechanistic perspective, I think it's going to be very protective of the skin and provide some anti-aging effect. Now, we've had a lot of people who use it and see textural changes to their skin in a relatively short amount of time, which is what's super exciting about this. It's not something you have to wait 3 months to see a difference. Most people are using it and seeing noticeable changes in 30 days, in 14 days, right? So things like texture, lines, and just the thickness of the skin and so on. So, I will say reluctantly that it is anti-aging. I always like to say things based on a research study or something we've done, but from a mechanistic standpoint, absolutely it has that function.
Thoughts about chapped lips, warts, and cankers in the mouth?
Interesting. So I would say, so chapped lips is another issue around loss of moisture barrier on the lips itself, right? So you can absolutely use it on your lips. That's one of the first places I started using it, because I use chapstick a lot on my bottom lip, especially because for some reason my bottom lip tends to get much more dry than my top lip. So I was using it on my lip quite a bit. And I also use a towel to kind of exfoliate my lip every couple of days, right? So you use a washcloth and you kind of exfoliate your lip, and then I put the sieve on, and that's helped me dramatically as well. Now, if you have things like warts, which are, of course, a viral outcome, right? You may be able to improve the outcome over a period of time. It's not going to treat it, because in most people with warts, the virus is actually way deeper in the ganglia, in the neurological ganglia. So it's way back there. It's closer to the spinal cord where the virus lives, but of course, it manifests its infection on the skin. So you might be able to reduce the time it takes for the wart to go away. You're not necessarily going to go after the virus, right? I can't logically think of a mechanism where you're going to go after. Now, with canker sores, it's interesting. With canker sores, I would actually I would take Megaspore and open it in a glass of water, and then swish it around and hold it in your mouth for a period of time before swallowing it. I don't think SIV would taste good in your mouth, so I wouldn't necessarily squirt that into your mouth. I would use something like the Megaspore instead.
Okay. And yes, everyone, you are getting a replay. Okay. It says, what about on facial scars?
Yes, I would absolutely use it on facial scars, because so scarring and the changes to the skin are affected by a number of mechanisms around the proteins, right? So there's something called matrix metalloproteinases. There are enzymes that induce changes to the proteins around the skin. And as it turns out, microbes can play a very important role in effectuating the function of those enzymes. So I would absolutely use it on scars. Now, if it's a 30-year-old scar, maybe not. Maybe if it's a recent scar in the last couple of years, there may be still an opportunity to diminish that scar to a certain degree. And if you're prone to scarring, so this is one of the other really important uses, right? If you're somebody that has dry skin, itchy skin, you're prone to scarring, maybe you have a little bit of acne as well, it's a great time to use it because not only can it help with the dryness, the acne, the itchiness and all that, but then as you're scratching yourself or trying to bust those pimples, it should reduce the ability, the formation of those scars as a result of you messing around with your skin as well, right? So not only will you mess around with your skin less, but if you do mess around, if you scratch your skin too much, you pop pimples and all that, it may reduce the scarring and the pigmentation that occurs as a result of the scarring as well.
Okay, so, okay, hang on. What about precancerous spots on the skin? Guys, this isn't medical advice. This is not snake oil. This is not, going to also fix your flat feet. So that's an inside joke I have. When I used to not want to go to school, my principal would say, "Oh, flat feet and dandruff." Well, in this case, dandruff maybe. So just try it. It's $59. My goodness.
Yeah, we haven't done it on any precancerous spots, so I can't say.
Yeah, this is, okay. What causes dry skin, perhaps? Do you have an answer for this? And if not, it's fine. Right from birth.
Yeah. So a lot of it could be, so if it starts from birth, it could be an issue with your liver's ability to produce these ceramide structures, right? Or it could be dysbiosis on the skin from day one. Of course, if you're C-section birth, you already have dysbiosis on the skin because you didn't pass through the vaginal canal and you picked up a lot of streptococcus, and staphylococcus that is not beneficial from the environment in the room. And you picked it up from the surgeon and from the nurse and so on. So early colonization by those dysfunctional microbes can lead to dryness from day one, right? Because you haven't yet produced enough of a ceramide layer. You've got these microbes producing toxins and creating inflammation on the barrier of the skin. So that could be a factor. You could have both an internal and an external factor from day one. But we know it's very clear, the studies are very clear that the ceramide structure, the lipid structure in your epidermal layer is the key to maintaining moisture of the skin. And the moment you start losing moisture, lots of other things falter. And so there's a study of this called transepidermal water loss that you can measure. And so that's one of the things that we're setting up to do is with this sieve is looking at transepidermal water loss. But we know from cases that we dramatically improve the moisture barrier of the skin.
Very cool. This person has been using the sieve. It's definitely been helping, and it helps draw out the stuff, which relieves the itching. That's great. That's great. I'm thinking of you. Let's see here. Do we have to be more careful with delicate areas of the body and what we apply in them? Yes, you definitely do. Inside and outside of the vaginal area, the armpits, the ears, 100%. Please be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and for example, like we say, be careful around the eyes. We don't want you to necessarily put it in your eyes, right? In the groin area, perfectly fine. If you're getting close to the vaginal opening, these are spores. They're not necessarily going to do anything negative. We know we have a lot of people that have used the megaspore intravaginally, of course, for bacterial vaginosis and so on. That they've been using that for a decade now. So it's not going to do anything negative. It may actually be beneficial to some degree, but certainly the areas that we say be careful around is if you have broken skin, right? Because we haven't tested it on broken skin. You need to do special types of testing on broken skin to say with a degree of certainty that it's perfectly fine. So we haven't done that. So we don't want to recommend it on broken skin. And then don't get it in your eyes either because we haven't tested it on eyes either, right? So, but for the most part, everywhere else, even sensitive areas like your groin and all that area, you're perfectly fine.
Carol, your 90-year-old mom who's got itchy skin all over, It sounds like an overgrowth. You cannot put it where the skin is broken, but I know I would definitely try this because my gosh, I would definitely try. If she has so many open sores, try to do it around the open sores, not
Yeah.
in, not
Yeah.
in. Okay, missed the link. Please put it in the chat. The link is in the chat. We've been adding it more. Is it okay to use twice a day? This
Yeah.
person has, yep, Morgellons, it's helping, wants to know if that's okay. Yep, we talked about that. How about Tony's? Hey, if you have a tattoo.
Oh, yeah. No issue at all.
No
Yeah.
problem?
No
Okay.
problem at all.
Let's see. Kieran, I don't know what time you have to go. So
You've got me, so
I
I'm here.
got you. Ooh,
I'm here
I like
for you.
it.
So
Does
yeah.
this help with melasma? And can you explain what
Oh,
that is in case someone doesn't know?
yeah, so melasma is like a hyperpigmentation. It's a darkening of the skin. It can happen more as you age, and UV exposure, for example, for some people can trigger it. In other individuals, it could be blood sugar regulation that can trigger it as well. What's interesting about it is often associated with aging and a dysfunction in the melanocytes. And so we haven't tested it on melasma to have enough cases to say, hey, we see X amount of improvement in melasma. But from a mechanistic standpoint, I think it can be very beneficial. My sister has a little bit of melasma on her forehead. She just started using it just after New Year's. I gave her a tube finally because I hadn't seen her for a while and I didn't have one with me. So I finally gave her one. So she started using it for that reason. So I'll get some results from her in a few weeks. But mechanistically, it makes sense that it can help with that.
Okay. Can you use it with children? A 4-year-old with eczema. I'm so sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great.
No issue with kids at all. Again,
Okay.
if the child's eczema lesion is broken skin, we would be cautious about it. But if it's not, if it's just dry patches of eczema, absolutely.
Okay. Perorial dermatitis. Benign eruptions that occur most commonly in young female adults, consisting of small inflammatory papules and pustules or pink scaly patches around the mouth.
Yeah, those are kind of similar to pimples, right? They're little. They're not comedones, the same as pimples, but they are pustules, as you would call them. So they are like little tiny infections, if you will. In those, I don't see an issue with those, and it could probably help. They're likely driven by dysfunctional bacteria entering into those regions and creating the inflammation and the infectious like presentation. I don't see an issue or risk. I can't say we have cases on it, but I don't see a risk in trying it with that.
Guys, if you have any questions about being a practitioner, site and pricing, reach out to Kiran on Instagram. He's really active there. Any research using with, I'm going to say it wrong, vertigo.
Oh, vitiligo.
Yeah.
Vitiligo is an autoimmune condition, right? So, or vitiligo, sorry, vitiligo is an autoimmune condition. So we don't have any research, and I can't think of any cases at all. From a mechanistic standpoint, in a vitiligo is you're basically attacking your own melanocytes and losing the ability to produce melanin and pigment. So I can't think of a mechanism by which a topical would help. So, I wish we had some data on that, but we don't.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. What are the different ways to accurately test the health of the different skin microbiomes on different areas of the body?
So we've been using a skin microbiome test that we use in research, right? So we're thinking about coming out with it and making it available commercially for people that may be interested in understanding
I know
what
they're
the skin
interested.
microbiome look like, right?
Do
So
that.
that's something we might be able to do, and give us a couple months. And if we do it and we do it as a commercial product, we'll introduce it to the SIBO SOS group first.
Thank you. You heard it here. Morgan, he said it. Thank you.
Write it down.
Among all the factors disrupting the intelligence.
Morgan said we are officially sold out. We can still place orders. We'll hold your order and we'll ship it as soon as we get more in.
Okay. Thanks, Morgan, because I just texted her. I was just messaging her. Back in stock in February. Here's what we're going to do. you'll still be able to get the two, just because you're here listening, you'll still be able to get the two parts of the masterclass that Kiran did, but you'll have to send us the email info@SIBO SOS, and you'll have to say it was out of stock. Just tell us, right? Like, it's back in stock. Just give me a sign, a message that, like, I was there for the webinar. I want the masterclass. It wasn't available when I bought it, but we now know at 4:16 Eastern time who bought it during this period. So please use the honor system there. Okay. Victoria, just keep at it. Morgan, maybe you can help Victoria. Morgan is on Kiran's team, by the way. Hi and welcome. How are your skin microbiomes and the different layers of the skin impacted by infrared sauna use? I would imagine big shifts after 120 to 30-minute session, a week's use, and every day for many years or decades. Fascinating question.
Yeah. In fact, there's some preliminary data. There's not a lot of science around, or a lot of publications around what is the impact of the skin microbiome from infrared sauna use. We know that infrared saunas have a very positive outcome on the skin in general. And in part, it may be because of the dilation and the detoxification, and we're getting rid of things that are potentially contaminating the skin layers and so on. So the sweating is just good for your skin in general because it removes things, right? So that's a good part of it. I would guess, just understanding physics around infrared and understanding microbes, that there's probably not a big impact on the microbes itself. Microbes are very resilient to different types of UV radiation or light-based frequencies. So I would say that the impact is probably more so on the immune system, on circulation, on the tissue itself, but not so much on the microbes in the skin.
SIBO SOS, y'all, is the, thanks, Morgan. SIBO SOS is the coupon. Okay, it's SIBO SOS, like as in save ourselves. What's leaky ears? Hey, Deborah, I'm sorry you're going through that. What's leaky ears? Do you know?
I'm not familiar.
Deborah, describe that for us. Could SIV be used on a nevus lake in the corner of the mouth? What's that?
That's like where it's like it's like a pooling of like what's the word for it? But anyway, you get like a pooling due to like a crack or an indentation in the corner of the mouth, right? That I mean, if it's an open broken part of the skin, though, I would say be cautious again because we haven't tested it for that. But if it's just inflamed and irritated, then absolutely, right? Any part of your skin that's inflamed and irritated, we tend to find it helps with that part. And again, if that inflamed, irritated part is also broken, then we say be cautious just because we haven't tested it on broken skin.
Yes, you should be concerned about what's in the air at your house. I would definitely use an air purifier, especially if your house is tight. A drafty house is a healthy house. It can be irritating and uncomfy, but it's a healthier house.
It is.
Okay, in Ayurveda, there's a practice going back, I don't know how many years, where they coat the whole body with certain oils. Do the oils seal up leaky skin in that they're saturating it and being absorbed through the skin layers, lymph, and I presume into the bloodstream with whatever toxins are killed off?
Yeah. My guess is, okay, so oils depending on the oil you use, right? So oils can offer to the skin a couple of different components. Number one, depending on the oil that you use, again, you might have free fatty acids in there, which will reduce the pH of the skin, which in general is good for the skin, right? So if you're dousing your skin in oils, you're reducing the pH, you're changing the microbiome of the skin in a favorable way. You may also be creating more anaerobic environments, which then allow some of the anaerobes like Propionum bacterium to grow and have a higher prevalence, which would be good. You're also probably, choking out and killing off things like fungus and yeast and mold and all that, because remember, yeast and molds and fungus don't grow in oils, right? They can't grow in oils. They get suffocated by oil. So that may be some of the functionality. So depending on the oils, there may be a lot of antioxidants. So if you take, for example, extra virgin olive oil, there's a lot of antioxidants and polyphenols in there that can be very beneficial for the skin because it reduces oxidative stress. So those may be some of the mechanisms. Certainly, I think if you coat the skin with oil, you're going to impact the skin microbiome, probably in a positive way, because of the effect that the oil can have.
What about dark age spots, liver spots?
Yeah. So age spots, as I mentioned, that's a very key part of the aging of the skin because of the senescence that occurs with the melanocytes, the cells that produce the pigment, the melanin. So that melanin and the melanocytes that produce melanin are the most susceptible cells for senescence on your skin, right? This is why as you age, you may develop age spots. So the senescence comes about because of oxidative damage on the skin. Your skin is going through free radical creation and oxidative damage all the time. A lot of it is due to UV radiation, now blue light irradiation, toxins, and all that. So having a healthy skin microbiome that modulates oxidative damage can certainly be protective against some of the senescence. So in my view, it becomes really important to maintain a healthy skin microbiome to reduce the risk of senescence and reduce the formation of these age spots, right? So an age spot that forms will eventually slough off. It may take a while because, of course, the skin layers grow out and then they leave. But what you want to do is prevent more age spot formation, or you'll have constant hyperpigmentation.
What about toenail fungus infections or athlete's foot?
Yeah, so that one we do have cases on, and it works amazingly well on topical fungal infections. So absolutely, you can use it on that. It's fantastic for that.
Awesome. So leaky ear is otis externa. It started from swimmer's ear. There's liquid that comes from my ears. Oh, it smells bad. I'm so sorry. I'm thinking it's a fungal issue.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds fungus among us.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's also perforation in the eardrum or something, that allows liquid to come through from the inner ear out. I mean, I can't say we could use it for that. I wouldn't necessarily drop it into your ear, externally on your lobe. If you've got dryness, irritation, fungal overgrowth, anything like that on your ear lobe, absolutely. But internally, if you're putting it in the ear, we don't know what happens.
Let's talk about sunscreen. What is the truth of the different sunscreens that have historically been used and that are the main ones people use today? Are there any organic, healthy ones, etc.? What can we do to help with a healthy way to resist the harmful impact of sun?
Yeah. Okay. So really at the end of the day, right, with sunscreen, it's really about, so when you look at the SPFs, what do they mean? If you have SPF 15 versus 60, is SPF 60 more protective? It's not actually more protective. It protects you longer. That's the difference between the SPF counts, right? So the way you test for SPF is you put a certain level and then you actually expose your hand to UV radiation in a little device, and then you see how long it takes to burn. And if it takes 30 minutes and it's equivalent to around SPF 30, 15 minutes, SPF 15, and so on, right? So the degree of protection is not increased, it's the duration of protection that's different, right? So you always need some form of SPF to protect against UV radiation, and you need higher SPF the longer you're going to be under UV radiation. However, here's the key thing. Once you come out of the sun, for the next 24 hours or so, the damage is still going on, right? And that's because of the generation of free radicals and the oxidative damage that the sun creates on the skin cells. This is where the skin microbiome can actually come in and provide a little bit more resilience, right? So in my view, when you think about the sun and you think about UV damage, you always want to use SPF if you're getting exposed to the sun. But if you have a more resilient skin microbiome, it will provide more resistance and resilience against the phototoxicity that occurs after you come out of the sun itself, right? And another thing that you can use after sun exposure, which is something I use. My kids are much more light toned than I am. I have more resilience to the sun because of my darker tone, but my kids have a lighter tone. So one of the things I might use for them to reduce the long-term effect of the sun is witch hazel. So witch hazel Yeah, witch hazel has a compound in it. Unfortunately, in most witch hazel extracts, that compound is only at 3 to 5%.
Yeah.
But that compound has been shown to be able to reduce the oxidative stress that UV radiation exposure creates, right? So if you're someone that's concerned about UV exposure and the damage, use enough SPF, use it for long enough, reapply it if you have to. But then once you come out of the sun, use some witch hazel a few times over the next 24 hours to try to reduce that UV radiation damage that occurs after you leave the sun. And of course, use the sieve before and after to ensure that the microbiome on your skin is resilient and provides you that barrier protection.
So seborrhea keratosis, have you done studies on that?
No.
Okay. All right. And then the keratosis pilaris, that's that upper arm, back of the arm. That's what you've used for your son.
Right.
So I wanted to clarify that. Okay, we have about 4 more minutes left because I unfortunately need to go, but this has been an hour and a half. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can you use it on sebaceous cysts on the back of earlobe that's not broken?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is castor oil going to change the effect?
We don't know. We've never used it with castor oil that I'm familiar with. I don't think so, especially if you use it separately. If you put on your sieve, let's say at night or in the morning, and the other end of the day you use a castor oil pack or something like that, I don't think it would negate the impact. I don't see why it would. So I wouldn't be concerned about using them together.
What about using red light with SIV? Something that could be helpful to apply before or after, or does it even matter?
It shouldn't matter. No, it doesn't. I don't think the light will interfere with anything that the sieve does. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think the light wavelengths have an impact on the microbes so much. So it shouldn't really matter. I wouldn't necessarily apply it and then use the light right after, because it may cause sweating and all that, and you may lose. You may sweat off some of the sieve.
Don't sweat it off.
Yeah, you don't want to sweat it off. So.
Yeah.
Put it on and let it soak in and go to bed. And then you can use the red light in the mornings or during the day when you're up.
It's not really a typical cream that's USDA certified organic plant-based cream. It's not that. It's more of a treatment. So I wouldn't really compare it to like a moisturizing cream. It's different.
It's not designed to be a moisturizer. No, it's a serum specifically.
Serum, right.
And you use it in tiny amounts on your skin. Like I said, 1 drop on each side, and that's usually enough to rub it all the way in.
Andrea is saying, I'm confused about what enzyme Kiran is speaking about. Is it pancreatic enzyme in the gut or something that the skin produces?
With regards to which part?
About 25 minutes ago when you were talking about skin enzymes in the presentation.
In the presentation, we're talking about enzymes that are produced by microbes on the skin itself.
Got it.
Yeah, so these are microbial enzymes, not your body producing these enzymes. So enzymes like urease, lipase, proteases, these are all produced by the microbes that live on your skin.
Okay, every time we use a systemic antibiotic like a Z-Pak or Cipro after being bit by ticks, it happens a lot to people where I live. Are we also losing the diversity of the skin microbiome as a result of these uses? Are the changes permanent, or can we do anything to prevent the amount of diversity loss?
So the changes are never permanent with microbes, right? So you can always effectuate an ecosystem of microbes depending on what you put in and what you take out. When you take an oral antibiotic, it doesn't have as much of an impact on the skin, but it does have some impact on the skin. That's why, for example, if you have a staph infection on your skin, you can actually take an oral antibiotic to help it, because the antibiotic will get to certain areas of the skin, especially where there's inflammation, right? One of the ways in which antibiotics make their way to the site of infection is they're carried through the pathologies that drive inflammation, right? So if you have already inflammation, redness on your skin, the antibiotic may get there more so than in areas that don't have inflammation. So in areas that are already disrupted, the antibiotics can actually make it worse. But at a lower degree than antibiotics, antimicrobials, and all that in topical products that are personal care products, right? Those we're using every single day, and those probably have a more profound effect over time than a Z-Pak would.
Okay. What is impetigo?
Impetigo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jean had it, was given Doxy. Would your products have helped? Also, could the serum be used for anti-aging or other cosmetic purposes? Yes. And I have a question about what other oil we can use for the rest of the body, and then we have to wrap. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem with using it with impetigo. We don't have any cases that I'm familiar with, unless Morgan has some cases, pop it in the chat. But I don't think so. I would have heard about it. But if you're using doxy with it, certainly it could be a good assistance with the doxy, right? And assuming it's not open and broken, so that's a key component to it.
Skin brushing and other involving wiping the top layer of the skin.
Oh, brushing. Yeah. So, so exfoliation, brushing and all that, that's fine. So the idea behind those and why it can be beneficial, we do it in a limited sense, right? You don't want to exfoliate and do dry brushing and all that too much, because you don't want to slough off too much of your top layers of the skin. The reason why those can be beneficial at all is because of that slow turnover of the dead cells in the stratum corneum. You can force that by brushing, you can force that by exfoliation, and it can have a beneficial outcome for your skin. Does this impact that at all? No, I would say if you're using the sieve, you can certainly still do some of those practices, but in general, those practices should be done limitedly. You shouldn't be exfoliating every day, right? You shouldn't be exfoliating 4 or 5 times a week. You should be exfoliating maybe once or twice a week.
What about for vaginal lichen sclerosis?
Again, no, we have no data use. Yeah.
Guys, that's a big old microbiome down there. So it's worth a try. And also, if you do ever go to the dermatologist and they test and then they culture, are they culturing for the bacteria strains that Kiran is talking about? Because just with an UTI, you can go, oh, we got a culture. Oh, it didn't show that you had an infection, but you have all these symptoms. Well, how many cultures are they doing at your local lab? And then, then you can go and spend another couple $100 on a more specialized culture test. But it's because if they're not culturing for the bacteria that you happen to have, the culture's not going to work. Sorry, I get very upset about this. Okay. Kiran, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here and hanging in there. It is sold out. Please put some love into the chat for Kiran, and we will send you an email when it is back in stock. And that was going to be just to the people who registered for this. And if you do buy it, we'll give you a couple of days. You can, buy it right away once we send out the email. And then you send us back that receipt during that limited time. We will get you those 2 master classes from Kiran. But right now, it is sold out. So for those of you who did purchase, we have 100 of you. Please do send us your proof of purchase to info@SIBO SOS, because then we'll send you that masterclass. And sorry, Clarissa, I know we're going to overwhelm customer service. I'm sorry. Should we wait to order when you send the email and still get the discount? So are you guys taking back orders, or do you want to wait?
Are.
Oh, they're taking back orders now. Okay, great. So, and it's first come, first serve.
Yep. And we'll fulfill them as soon as the product comes in. So we can hold those orders and do that.
Okay. So that changes everything I just said. Go put your order in right now, then send us the proof of purchase. We'll know you did it during the webinar, and
that makes it easier.
Yeah. Okay, great. And it's first come, first serve. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is such a fun thing. Same here. We'll do it again.
Okay. Sounds great. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. And you can find Kiran at SIV Skincare, right? What is it on Instagram?
SIV Care.
SIV Care. SIV Care. On Instagram. He's on there all the time talking about all kinds of very interesting things, as always. Thanks, everybody. Okay, take care. Thanks, Clarissa. Bye, all.